Hello everyone, in this video we're going to have a quick look at some telephoning basics which will give you a good base to ask any question you want on the phone and to approach each issue with confidence in your language. Before we get to the language, first of all we have to go through some basics. The first thing is, and I know it sounds a bit silly but I do have to go through it, you have to be confident in using the English alphabet and listening to the alphabet. I'll show you why later on. But for now I'll quickly model the sounds now. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, or Z for American English. For the Polish audience, you might find the following guide useful, which tells you how to say each letter based on the sounds of the Polish alphabet. Take a few seconds to have a look at this. You'll also find links below the video to other people who model the English alphabet. Knowing the alphabet is easy. Listening and catching letters as they're being spoken, however, can be quite difficult, especially if the letters have a different sound in your native language. For example, in English, R is a soft sound. In Polish, it's a hard sound, and as a British native, I find the Polish sound very difficult to make. Similarly, if you're Polish and you hear R, you might not think of it as the letter R, but as A, or miss it. So what do we do in that case? Well, there is such a thing as the phonetic alphabet, which is widely used by the police and military, where each letter is replaced by a word. This phonetic alphabet is generally well known. A link to the widely accepted NATO phonetic alphabet can be found below this video. Very quickly, it's Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta Echo Foxtrot Golf Hotel India Juliet Kilo Lima Mike November Oscar Papa Quebec Romeo Sierra Tango Uniform Victor Whiskey X-Ray and Zulu. If you know that, great. However, most people might simply use the A for Apple approach. Here you can either stick to very well-known objects, such as A for Apple, or names, like N for Nicky. Secondly, you'll also need to have a very good grounding in how to say numbers in English. So if you're unsure about how to express numbers, please revisit Business English Unit 1. Okay, that being said, let's have a look at some simple telephoning basics. Surprisingly, if we look at most basic phone communication, relatively few structures form the basics to communicating lots of phone messages in English correctly. The basic underlying principle is we want to speak in a professional, business-like manner, which is also polite. The main way you can do this is to master indirect question forms. At this point, if you don't know what an indirect form is, please go over to the grammar section and Unit 9, which looks specifically at indirect question forms. To show you how indirect question forms are commonly used, let's have a look at some basic telephoning situations. For example, someone phones the firm and you want to know who's calling, why they're calling, from where they're calling, and who they want to speak to. So which indirect question forms can you use for these? Well, have a think for a few moments. You might have come up with something similar to, can I ask who is calling, please? Can I ask the reason for your call or the purpose of your call? Can I ask where you're calling from? Can I ask who you want to speak to? You can just as easily say could instead of can in each of those examples. Please note, however, that if you're requesting information from the caller, you should only use could you and not can you, as could you is more polite. Okay, let's have a look at a few circumstances in which we can put those rules into practice. The situation is, you are making a phone call from your company, ABC, to another company to connect Mr. Brown, who asked you to call, to Mr. White. Take a look at the following situations and think of some ways using indirect forms you can express them. Here are some possible answers. These are not the answers because of course there can be many ways of saying this, but these are only suggested answers. I'm phoning on behalf of Mr. Brown from ABC. Can I be put through to Mr. White, please? If Mr. White isn't available, you might say something like, can I leave my contact details, please? Or can I call back in 30 minutes? We can see that the basic structures can I or could you can easily be used to communicate anything you want by using a bare infinitive afterwards. Can I talk to? Could you put me through to? And so on. What I'd like you to do now is to click on the link below this video called Example Questions and Answers and read the proposed situations and suggested answers. Please pause the video now and read through all of the examples as I'll be referring to some points in that document when I continue in the video. Did you read through the document? Good. Keep it open as I continue. You might have noticed that some of my responses started with I'm sorry. This is what's called a negative positive or a British apology. This works on a number of levels. 1. Apologies, albeit general and without blaming anyone, have a positive effect on the listener. 2. Generally speaking, it is a polite form of speaking in British English. And 3. It can work as a persuasive tool to make the caller see your way of thinking. So I would encourage you to use it too. There's a great link below to a BBC article which explains why Brits say sorry so much and what effect it has. Another thing you might have noticed is that in my answers in some cases I take ownership of the problem. For example, could I ask you to instead of can you? This could I ask you to is a more indirect form and therefore more polite. Also, the focus is on you, not the caller, which indicates it's your problem, not the caller's. Look at I'm sorry, could I just confirm the reason for calling, as opposed to can I ask you why you're calling? The focus is on you not knowing something as opposed to the caller not saying something. This is particularly important if the could you question may come across as rude. See the person's accent issue. Here, I offered an alternative solution, more about that in a second, rather than saying, can you speak clearly please, which of course is a terrible thing to say. This change of focus from you to me is 1. More polite and 2. Persuasive. It encourages the caller to give you the information you want. If you remember, the can I ask structure was something that I used at the beginning of the video about getting information from the caller. I mentioned the possible solution to a lack of understanding issue. In this case, it was to write an email in response to not understanding an accent. The alternative solution is a great way out. Apologize for a bad line or a bad connection and ask the person to write an email instead. Let's go through some other common issues. Delaying or not letting someone through. Someone calls you and they want to speak to someone and for whatever reason you don't want to let them through. Don't say, I'm afraid the person is ill or too busy or can't take your call right now, as these come across rather negatively. Instead, say something more neutral. I'm afraid the person isn't at their desk, or is not picking up, or is in or at a meeting, or has a prior engagement, or simply not available. And of course, always finish off with, can I get your contact details please? Another situation might be putting people through or on hold. You might say, I'll put or I'll pop you on hold. Don't say, can I put you on hold please? As if you give someone the choice, they simply might say no. Be strong here and inform the caller what you're going to do. I'll put you on hold. Afterwards, you can either come back and block as we looked at a few moments ago, or you can say something like, I'll pass you on or through to whoever the caller wants to speak to. If the caller is someone who doesn't want to tell you why they are calling, you can say, I'm sorry, I really must insist that you tell me the purpose of your call or why you're calling. If you don't, I must end the call. This is an apology, a demand, and a threat. The phrase, I really must insist, is pretty strong stuff, especially when said with emphasis. Okay, apart from using indirect question forms and using negative politeness through saying I'm sorry, there are other ways to express politeness in English through use of structure. I'm not going to go into this in great detail as I'll be repeating information which you can find online and is excellently explained in the links to politeness below this video. Okay, I've given you some basic rules as regards phoning, structure and persuasion. Of course, there are probably many other situations you might deal with, but the basic English structures that you use share similarities to that which we discussed today. To find out a lot more about this language area, please click on and read all of the links below the video to learn more.